Former IGP Sovula allegedly beats Imam and pastor, a test of justice, peace, and state authority in Sierra Leone. When power refuses to retire and silence replaces justice, nations are tested. Good evening. This is BAV Inside Salon, and I am Ahisatu Kamara Kargbo. Tonight, we confront a disturbing allegation that has shaken Bumpeh Ngao Chiefdom in Bo District, and by extension, the conscience of our nation. At the center of this unfolding crisis is the former head of the nation's police force, Ambrose Sovula. Community members allege that he led an assault and illegal detention of two religious leaders, an imam and a Christian pastor, leaving one in critical condition. These claims, if proven, raise fundamental questions about accountability, the rule of law, and the boundaries between personal authority and state power in Sierra Leone. Let's pause here to watch two short clips, one from an eyewitness and another from the imam recounting his ordeal. When we return, I'll unpack his statements with deeper, critical analysis. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Bold African Voice to help amplify Africa's voices.
Once more again, this message will go to all imams cut across the southern province, and more especially Bo District and Sierra Leone as a whole, and even the world at large. We get information that the formal IG, they make allegation against and say a touch of one imam. Now the southern province and one to them called Bongor, now they will so. Now the very scene, now the spot, who said that Alex, now they can arrest the imam put in team, whether they get gone with them, they beat them, then torture them, they can kidnap and then get and go a mile away distance so they go keep them, now then under the arrest. But as we get this information, we know they stop until we come at the scene. We can't find out, are they with the blacksmith where it be then at the scene where the imam be counselor for sharp in cutlass for talk to them, make it tell we actually what it be see that day where they allege against this statement, this issue will happen. But what's my name?
I'm Sheikh Abdullah.
Say name Sheikh Abdullah. You know what you so kill na?
I'm blacksmith.
You are blacksmith. On that day, you go to tell me anything will be happen to Imam Sheikh Bashiru. Anything will be happen to
Ibrahim Basi.
Imam Ibrahim Basi. What will be happen to that day? What you been there?
Yeah, be there.
Yeah, go explain to we law. We are in the nation. They led the entire nation here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Talk. You able talk about create talk. You able talk about me talk.
Okay. This is the blacksmith with the regional imam for interview.
Okay.
So we don't go to the hospital, we don't come back to the village, na the Bongor. So now the party interview the blacksmith for make it explain in detail, but you know we will talk the Creole better pass the language, but we go for the interpreter inshallah. Now.
When you go back again, come on, brown one way.
The pastor be left na the blacksmith say left na one money, then Sheikh Ibrahim count in cutlass for make it sharper.
After one when I can get in a buina man.
After I count with the cutlass, is sit on by this stick so.
Kenyanga we my boy.
They try for sharp the cutlass.
The one more two while if we come on the year.
You see two motoka car pass and one Honda.
IG motoka.
The former IG in motoka.
They
go down by this road when I'm Mokuba route. They turn the motocar.
You don't have a PC, what I'm of Lumia or Bangai Pera, Kinibangai Pera.
In picking the way na PC, can't pin the motocar to one power don't call.
IG Mofulu and then a pumpinala.
In the former IG pin motocar by that pump. Yanda. By the pump yanda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to look at Buja.
Is it three?
Careful the driving.
You see the former IG Candon and three of in boys including driver. Energetic one day.
The two are 40 dear, come on, Brahma, they are under arrest.
Na in one in Baba when I for the can treaty the party, Imam Ibrahim say you under arrest.
Then the former IG, Mr.
Sovula, a rush, a can hold in neck, a gripper. The love for dragon and grunty, trusses come up and a tail put up. The person at that is she.
So, we tell una thank you plenty. We brother at the blacksmith with the open space. We pray that Allah bless you by work with the farm. The nation at large, as we come for the investigation, we know the judge matter, but we get to solve the good present.
Compound. Hey, they beat me. In Sovula, now knock me.
No cry, yeah.
They beat me, say, the mass, me belete.
Yeah.
They naked me. In brother, David Sovula. They hold me so, now so they hold me. They go car with water, they put up on me. That pepper spray.
That pepper water?
Yeah.
They put up on you?
Yeah.
Okay.
They put up on me. So I'm not able to cry. So I get back, money did it, 30,000. It's a phone because my sister and I send money for make I buy the Gary, that phone for sale. So Techno 3, Samsung 1, because I did sell top up phone.
What happened in Bongor village? According to multiple community accounts, the incident traces back to the early hours of January 5, 2026, in Bongor village, Bumpeh Ngao Chiefdom. Villagers fetching water reportedly discovered what they described as a sinister charm concealed near a static pit by a local stream. Alarmed, they took the object to the village Imam, Ibrahim Bassi, for interpretation. Sources say Imam Bassi warned residents of potential danger and shared the information via the village WhatsApp group, an act intended, residents insist, to protect the community. What followed, according to the Imam's own account, shared during Friday prayers on January 16th, was a violent escalation, allegations of abduction and brutality. Imam Bassi told worshippers that shortly after the message circulated, he was confronted by a group of men allegedly led by the former IGP. He claims he was forcibly seized, bundled into a vehicle trunk, taken to an undisclosed location, and severely beaten. Community sources say the assault left him struggling to speak and barely able to identify his attackers. When Pastor Emmanuel Kapenge of the New Apostolic Church learned of the incident, witnesses say he rushed to intervene, condemning the violence and warning that it threatened communal peace. Instead of de-escalation, accounts allege further abuse. Both religious leaders, along with 2 others, were reportedly stripped naked, handcuffed, and mistreated. Detention without charges. The ordeal did not end there. Witnesses say the victims were first taken toward the Bo police station, but denied entry. They were then allegedly held at the residence of the former IGP before being transported to the Criminal Investigation Department in Freetown, where they were detained for 5 days without clear charges. This detail is crucial. Detention without charge strikes at the heart of constitutional safeguards and due process, protections that should bind every citizen, and especially those who once enforced the law. A life hanging in the balance. On January 19, 2026, family members reported that Imam Bassi collapsed at home and was rushed to Sarabu Hospital, where he was admitted to intensive care. His condition, community leaders say, sent shockwaves through the chiefdom, fueling fear, grief, and anger. Efforts to obtain a response from Ambrose Sovula were unsuccessful. Through intermediaries, he reportedly said he was hospitalized and unable to comment. A community on edge. Elders, youths, and religious leaders in Bumpeh Ngao Chiefdom warn that the absence of accountability is deepening divisions. Calls are growing for government intervention, not only to investigate the alleged abuses, but to facilitate dialogue and reconciliation before tensions spiral. Residents stress that this is not merely about 2 victims. It is about whether communities can trust institutions when power appears personalized and unchecked. Africa-wide comparison, a familiar pattern. Across Africa, similar cases reveal a troubling pattern, former security chiefs retaining informal power long after leaving office. In Nigeria, allegations of extrajudicial actions by retired security figures continue to surface. In Uganda and Cameroon, communities have accused former officials of using past networks to intimidate civilians. In Zimbabwe, debates persist over the lingering influence of security elites in civilian life. The lesson is consistent. Where post office accountability is weak, the shadow of the uniform can outlast the mandate. Critical analysis: when authority outlives office. If these allegations are substantiated, they would expose a dangerous erosion of institutional boundaries. No former official, police, military, or political, should exercise coercive power outside the law. The alleged stripping, handcuffing, and detention without charge represent not only personal abuse, but institutional failure. The denial of entry at a police station, if accurate, raises further questions about command influence and fear within law enforcement structures. This is why independent investigation matters. Forward-looking approach: what must happen next? First, an independent, time-bound investigation with medical, forensic, and witness protections must be launched. Second, judicial oversight must determine whether unlawful detention and assault occurred. Third, community-based reconciliation, led jointly by Muslim and Christian leaders, must be supported by the state. Fourth, clear post-service conduct rules for former security chiefs should be codified and enforced. This is not about vengeance. It is about restoring trust. Sources and references. Victims' testimonies shared during Friday prayers in Bumpeh Ngao Chiefdom, January 16, 2026. Community accounts and interviews with Bongor village elders and youth leaders, January 2026. Family statements regarding Imam Ibrahim Bassi's hospitalization at Sarabu Hospital, January 19, 2026. Reporting and eyewitness materials circulated by local journalists and civil society monitors in Bo District, constitutional provisions of Sierra Leone on unlawful detention and abuse of authority, comparative governance analyses by African civil society, organizations on post office security, influence the silence of institutions, and the cost of waiting. The most troubling dimension of this case is not only what allegedly happened, but what has not happened since. Nearly 3 weeks after the alleged assault, there has been no public statement from the Sierra Leone police, no confirmation of an internal inquiry, and no indication that the Independent Police Complaints Board, where applicable, has opened a formal case. For communities already carrying historical scars of abuse and neglect, silence is not neutral. Silence speaks. In Bongor and surrounding villages, residents say rumors now travel faster than facts. Youth groups whisper about self-defense. Elders plead for restraint. Religious leaders urge calm from pulpits and minbars alike. Yet calm without justice is fragile, and history across Sierra Leone warns us what happens when grievances ferment unattended. Religion as a bridge or a flashpoint. This case cuts across one of Sierra Leone's most cherished identities, interfaith coexistence. For decades, Muslims and Christians have lived, worshipped, married, and mourned together with remarkable harmony. That an imam and a pastor allegedly stood side by side as victims and advocates for peace should have been a rallying point for national solidarity. Instead, community leaders fear that politicization or selective justice could turn faith into a fault line. Across Africa, we have seen how quickly this can happen. In parts of Nigeria, unresolved attacks on clerics have triggered cycles of retaliation. In Ethiopia, perceived targeting of religious figures has deepened communal fractures. Sierra Leone cannot afford to import those failures. The legal questions that will not go away. From a legal standpoint, several unanswered questions demand clarity. Who authorized the arrests? On what legal basis were the victims detained for 5 days without charge? Why was access reportedly denied at a police station? Were medical examinations conducted immediately after release as required in cases of alleged abuse? Legal analysts point out that even if a security concern was cited, Sierra Leonean law does not permit private detention by former officials. If proven, such acts would constitute criminal offenses, not administrative lapses. Africa-wide governance lessons, retired power, active fear. Across the continent, democratic backsliding often begins with blurred lines between state authority and personal power. In Ghana, reforms after the Ayawaso West Wogon by-election violence strengthened civilian oversight of security actors. In Kenya, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, though imperfect, has prosecuted senior officers, sending a signal that rank does not confer immunity. Sierra Leone's post-war gains were built on a promise: never again would power operate above the law. This case tests that promise. The human story behind the headlines. At the center of all this analysis is a man fighting for his life. Family members of Imam Ibrahim Bassi say he still struggles with speech and mobility. Medical bills are mounting. Trauma lingers. Pastor Emmanuel Kapenge, associates say, has received quiet threats urging him to let the matter rest. This is how injustice compounds itself, first through violence, then through fear. Where does accountability begin? Civil society groups are now calling on the Ministry of Justice to appoint a special prosecutor, arguing that ordinary channels may be compromised by influence. Others want Parliament's Committee on Internal Affairs to summon witnesses and demand answers under oath. Meanwhile, youth leaders in Bo warn that patience is wearing thin. "We are calm," one organizer said, but calm is not the same as silence. A moment that defines a nation. Moments like this are crossroads. Handle them well and trust deepens. Handle them poorly or not at all, and cynicism hardens into resistance. Sierra Leone stands at such a moment now. This is not about prejudging guilt. It is about process, about ensuring that allegations involving a former inspector general are treated with more transparency, not less. About proving that justice does not retire when officials do. And so tonight, as we continue to follow developments from Bongor, from Bo, and from Freetown, one question remains suspended in the air, unanswered, unresolved, and increasingly urgent. Who polices the police when the uniform is gone? That unanswered question hangs heavy tonight, because at its core, this case forces Sierra Leone to confront an uncomfortable truth. What mechanisms exist to restrain power once the badge is removed, but the influence remains? Former security chiefs often retain loyal networks, informal authority, and community fear. Without clear post-service accountability rules, the transition from public office to private life becomes dangerously ambiguous. Legal scholars note that this gray zone, neither fully civilian nor formally accountable, has been the breeding ground for abuse in multiple African states emerging from conflict. And Sierra Leone, still navigating the long shadow of its civil war, cannot afford to treat this ambiguity lightly. The role of the state: protector or bystander? Residents in Bo District say their greatest fear is not just retaliation, but abandonment. When citizens allege abuse by powerful figures and see no visible response, confidence in the state erodes. That erosion rarely announces itself loudly. It shows up quietly in non-cooperation, in rumor, in parallel systems of justice. Security analysts warn that when communities begin to believe that justice depends on who you know rather than what the law says, the legitimacy of the state itself starts to fracture. Media, misinformation, and the battle for truth. Social media has amplified this case far beyond Bongor village. Videos, photos, and voice notes, some verified, others not, circulate daily. While digital platforms have given victims a voice, They have also fueled speculation and inflamed emotions. Journalists on the ground caution that information vacuums invite misinformation. This is why timely, factual communication from authorities is not optional. It is a stabilizing force. Civil society steps in, but cannot replace the state. Human rights organizations and interfaith coalitions have begun documenting testimonies, medical reports, and timelines. Quiet mediation efforts are underway to prevent escalation. These interventions matter, but they are not substitutes for formal justice. Across Africa, civil society has repeatedly filled gaps left by hesitant states. In South Africa, watchdog groups exposed police brutality when institutions stalled. In Senegal, faith leaders mediated where politics failed. But even in those cases, long-term stability only followed state action, not goodwill alone. The dangerous precedent of impunity. If allegations of assault, illegal detention, and denial of due process go uninvestigated, especially when linked to a former inspector general, the precedent is chilling. It signals to other former officials that influence can outlive office without consequence. And once that signal is sent, it is almost impossible to retract. Voices from the ground. We want law, not chaos. In Bongor, elders say they have rejected calls for revenge. Youth leaders say they are urging patience. Religious figures continue to preach restraint. But all three groups deliver the same message. Restraint must be met with response. A respected community elder put it plainly. We are not asking the government to choose sides. We are asking it to choose the law. The national implications, far beyond Bo. What happens next will echo far beyond Bumpeh Ngao Chiefdom. Sierra Leone's international partners, donors, and peace-building institutions are watching closely. The country's post-war reputation, built painstakingly on reconciliation, constitutional order, and civilian control of security forces, is now under scrutiny. This moment will inform how future allegations against powerful individuals are handled or avoided. The question that refuses to fade, and so, as Imam Ibrahim Bassi remains under medical care, as Pastor Emmanuel Kapenge weighs silence against conscience, and as a community waits for answers, the question grows louder, not quieter. Is Sierra Leone prepared to hold its most powerful former officials to the same standard as its poorest citizens? That question has not yet been answered, and until it is, the tension in Bongor, in Bo, and across the country will remain, quietly building, patiently waiting, and watching for what comes next. The responsibility of leadership. Power is a trust, not a weapon. And as we bring this long and painful story to a close tonight on BAV Inside Salone, it is important to step back and confront the deeper lesson staring us in the face. Leadership, whether political, religious, or security-based, is not ownership of people. It is custodianship of trust. When authority is used to intimidate, humiliate, or silence, it ceases to be leadership and becomes domination. History shows us that nations do not collapse only because of poverty or external shocks. They collapse when citizens lose faith that the law protects them equally. The allegations surrounding Ambrose Sovula, serious as they are therefore not just about one former official. They are about systems, norms, and choices, especially the choices made by those currently in power when confronted with uncomfortable truths. A word to African leaders: listen before it is too late. To leaders across Sierra Leone and the African continent, this moment carries a warning. Silence in the face of credible allegations does not preserve stability. It postpones instability. Delayed justice does not heal wounds, it deepens them. Protecting powerful allies may feel politically convenient today, but it weakens the moral authority of the state tomorrow. Africa's future will not be secured by strong men, serving or retired, but by strong institutions, independent courts, and leaders willing to submit themselves to scrutiny. The uniform, the title, and the office must never become shields against accountability. A word to African citizens: demand justice, not chaos. To African citizens, especially the youth, your anger is understandable, but your restraint is powerful. History teaches us that violence born of injustice often destroys the very communities it seeks to defend. Demand accountability, document abuses, support victims, engage civil society, use lawful protest, advocacy, and the courts. Justice pursued lawfully outlives injustice resisted violently. The courage shown by Imam Ibrahim Bassi and Pastor Emmanuel Kapenge, standing for community peace despite personal cost, should remind us that moral leadership often comes from the least protected, not the most powerful. Key messages. What this story teaches us. Let us be clear about the lessons emerging from Bumpeh Ngao Chiefdom. No one is above the law, including former security chiefs. Illegal detention and abuse, if proven, are crimes, not misunderstandings. Institutional silence fuels instability more than transparency ever will. Interfaith unity is a national asset that must never be endangered by impunity. Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice pursued lawfully builds lasting peace. This case will define more than the fate of its victims. It will define whether Sierra Leone, and Africa more broadly, chooses rule of law over rule of influence, institutions over individuals, and justice over fear. Final reflection. As we close tonight, the people of Bongor village are still waiting. The nation is still watching. And history is still recording. What happens next will tell future generations whether this was a moment when the law stood firm or when power was allowed to speak louder than justice. I am Ahisatu Kamara Kargbo. This has been BAV Inside Salone. And tonight's message is simple but urgent. Africa must choose accountability before accountability chooses Africa. Power must answer to the law, whether in uniform or not. If Africa is to move forward, accountability cannot stop at retirement. If this story matters to you, share it, like, and subscribe to the Bold African Voice, because silence protects abuse, but truth protects society. Until next time, stay informed, stay bold, and never stop asking the hard questions. Thank you for watching.